Further remarks, Senator Nobles.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have spent hours today listening to my colleagues and trying to understand this legislation, and it is very challenging to understand, and I have very brilliant colleagues, all of them that I trust in some way, shape, or form, even if those are not all the same ways. And tonight there were words describing this bill such as exciting and unifying, and I think for me today, discussing this bill has been very traumatizing. And I'm really sleepy because my bedtime is 9 o'clock, and so I'm gonna try not to just have a meltdown here, but listening to the conversation, it has just made me think about the reality of, some of the stories we've talked about. And to have a parent that still to this day, 30 plus years, struggles with a substance use disorder, and to know that the war on crime did not work. And in the 80s and 90s, I had to watch my parent sit in jail, face prison, and here we are decades later, and they're still struggling with the substance use disorder. Throwing the book at my mother was not the solution for her ever. It landed our family in shelters. It landed my siblings and I in foster care. And my mother still struggles with her substance use disorder. And so when I listen to these stories in the ways that we want to wag our finger at someone and think that that's gonna bring them healing and bring us justice, it's just not the case or scenario for everyone. And I'm sure there will be cases where this legislation will have a positive impact, I'm sure. But I just have a real life story where I just know and understand that I wanna be a more compassionate leader, a more understanding leader. I want to be a leader that's going to look at real solutions that help individuals who are going to struggle with substance use disorders. And when I have seen my mother shine and really make progress, it's when she's been able to live in a clean and sober house, when she's been able to get her behavioral health support, and when she's been able to be treated for her substance use disorder. And I've heard people use past tense, they've loved or watched or helped, but I watch, I help, I talk to and navigate with my mom on a daily basis as she walks through her substance use disorder. And so I'm a no on this legislation. And again, I'm sure my colleagues mean well. And I'm sure if this passes out the legislature, there may be many individuals that benefit positively because maybe they'll get the help that they need. But I just know that my vote will be for folks who criminalizing their behavior, not giving them the help that they need, it's not going to help them to move forward, and it's going to destroy more families. And I don't want to be a vote to see more families go through what I had to go through. And I'm crying not just from the trauma of today, but I'm crying just because I'm tired, and I would love to go home, but this is important legislation, and I wanted to lend my voice to the issue and just real stories and real people from not the past, but the present. And so I love my mom, even with all her struggles, even with all the things that she put us through. And I hope that she continues to lean into the things that have helped her. And as many times as we need to send her to rehab, or as many times she walks into rehab, as many times as she finds herself unhoused, I will stand by her, and I will never criminalize her because she has an illness. And so again, I vote no, and blessings to my colleagues, however they choose to vote tonight, Mr. President. But I hope that we remain compassionate and that we are striving towards real solutions for people in our community who are really struggling. Thank you.
Senator Nobles.
Thank you, Mr. President. Fear is how I believe we got here, and hope is what causes me to rise today. I have heard from a number of people that the fear that has been instilled in them from our local law enforcement is what causes them to absolutely believe that the laws that we passed in 2021 are not working. What I hope is that we can trust ourselves as leaders. I also hope that we can trust that we still need more data so that we can understand the benefits and the real costs associated with pursuits. We do have some data. We do know that the bill is working because lives have been saved. And my colleagues have pointed out quite a few pieces of data today, but I would like to take a moment to honor some of the lives of innocent bystanders, lives that were lost because of dangerous pursuits. And before I get there, I do want to acknowledge that there are lots of crimes. In fact, there's a list of violent crimes that should result in a vehicular pursuit. But crimes like misdemeanors and property crimes, we do need to make sure that we are placing the value on human life, Mr. President. And so I today want to make sure that I get to lift up, mention this, Mr. President, but the student, Johnavy, who we lost out of Seattle, 23 years old, a pedestrian from Port Orchard who survived but was injured. Mr. President, Senator Trudeau mentioned my district, which is why I will be a no vote today, because my district is overrepresented in the data that says that these pursuits are causing harm to residents like mine in the 28th Legislative District. But a 43-year-old who was actually trying to help and be a really good citizen was pinned by a car and lost their life. I also want to take a moment to honor the life of a 64-year-old father from Skagit County who lost his life. And another individual from my district in the 28th, a 33-year-old who lost his life in the driveway of his house. And a 32-year-old daughter and sister who was an innocent passenger and lost her life to a vehicular pursuit. And a married couple, 54-year-old woman and 54-year-old man. And I've been married before, and I know how that goes. But they lost their lives. A beautiful couple. And so I want us to keep in mind that we did a good thing when we said that this tool of vehicular pursuit doesn't work for every circumstance and every situation. And I agree with some of the remarks earlier of the use of technology. There are ways to pursue that don't need to involve a vehicle so that we can solve crimes, because I don't want anyone to be victimized. I do want crimes to be solved in our community. And I also want to acknowledge that it is a false choice, and it is simply unfair that we have had for a couple of years now this fight, this tension, that we've been pitted against law enforcement as legislators who are standing as caring leaders, Mr. President. And it's especially unfortunate because my own father served as a law enforcement officer. My good friend serves as a law enforcement officer. I have a cousin that is also an officer. And in fact, the other thing as we talk about data is law enforcement is actually not on the same page as it relates to vehicular pursuits. Law enforcement in and out of our state will tell you the absolute truth, which is vehicular pursuits for the types of crimes that we are advocating, well, not me, that some folks are advocating, Mr. President, to put back in this bill, are an inappropriate response. We don't need to have vehicular pursuits for misdemeanors and property crimes because we have enough tools in our toolkits. I've had local chiefs tell me they're not on the same page as folks who are using fear. Again, that's how we got here, to these new changes to this bill. Fear, telling people that our law enforcement can't do their jobs because of the changes that we made, when in fact that they can. There are so many tools that they get to use. So because I'm hopeful that we're going to stand by the decision that we made, because this bill is working, because lives are being saved, because we place value on human life, because we know people are more valuable than property, and because also we know we simply need even more data about the costs and the benefits of pursuits, I will be a no vote, and I stand here hopeful that many more of my colleagues, Mr. President, will also vote no on this bill. Thank you, Mr. President.